Hi all, Rick here with a casual tour around the operations centre of Deep Space Nine. This became such an iconic location for Star Trek for its standout design. By standout, I mean that it was not typical of Federation fashion nor built to the standards associated with Starfleet vessels, as it is of Cardassian origin. Hallmarks of this design are found not only in the materials used and operating system present, but in its very layout. Let's take a look around. Unlike the bridge of a ship, the operations centre is set out in a very different style to accomplish different things. Its primary role was to act as the command centre of the operation of the station, while monitoring surrounding space and coordinating other vessels with its docking and cargo activities. On a subtle level too, the station was not designed to go anywhere, so most of the consoles and interfaces were set in a practical formation rather than facing forwards. As with Starfleet bridges, many of the systems around could have their functions converted to other stations. Unlike a starship though, the operations centre was the only point on the station for which everything could be controlled, besides some manual reactor functions. The ceiling has Cardassian-style windows that provide a view of the upper docking pylons and the space beyond, alleviating the claustrophobic feeling that often accompanies life aboard a station or ship. This gives us the one-to-one location from an external view of Deep Space Nine, placing the operations centre at the very top of the centre of the station's rings. Above it is the communications array, while below it is the deflector emitters for the shields and general particle protection. Entry is found in one of three ways. The most common is the turbolifts that pass through the main core of the station, stopping at the promenade and lower reactor levels. These turbolifts, unlike Starfleet's, feature an open wall and no doors. When they are in operation, it's entirely possible to hop off them early. The second point of entry is the operations room transporter pad, which was commonly used to beam to and from other ships docked or nearby the station, but was also used for site-to-site beaming. Interestingly enough, this quick access was something that was later incorporated into the UFP's Odyssey class. The final method of entry is one of the two doors to the front of Ops, which led to a narrow access corridor that ultimately terminated at the promenade level for use when the power was out or the station on lockdown. These entries were protected by force field emitters in emergencies, and even continued around Ops, acting as an alternate entrance to the commander's office. At the rear of the deck is entry into the commander's office, an isolated desk with a view of the stars and several smaller seating areas to the side to entertain guests. The design was so that the commander of the station would remain physically detached, but overlooking the staff that are literally below them in the tiered layout of the centre. Under Cardassian ownership, the Gull in charge was expected to spend most of their time here while on duty, while in the era of Starfleet and Bajoran ownership, it functioned more as a ready room for private meetings. However, thanks to the readouts and status reports being fed into the office, unlike a starship's captain's chair, it did mean that, for the majority of the time, the commander of the station was still apart from the rest of the Ops crew. The left-hand door inside the office led to a washroom that was never seen, which for that matter, there must be a second somewhere in the corridor behind one of those Ops doors. Surely. If you were standing facing the view screen from the command office, there was a cluster of consoles to the left and the right. Starting with the left side, there is the Engineering and General Operations section. The officer here would have access to all the station's systems and reports concerning maintenance. From here they could issue commands and alterations to most of the station, as well as oversee assigned duties of other teams. Power management and station defences were interactable here. On the wall behind these posts was the expansive station systems panels, which included habitat and life support, including gravity and other such systems. The very end of the main console, on the other side of the bisecting conduit, was the Strategic Operations Post, which allowed for similar levels of observation and control, but was mostly concerned with security issues and would feature such as alerts and security breaches and target locks. However, as the station was not always manned, These functions were often relayed to the main operations console. There is this column that emerges from the consoles and heads into the upper wall that I could not find a purpose for. However, considering its placement, clearly it was added for something above ops, otherwise you could have had it running through the floor, so I assume it carries the connective cables and conduits to the subspace array atop the centre. The right-hand consoles were divided into two stations. The closest to the office was the science station, which offered only two consoles. This is because frankly Terok Nor was not designed to be a science outpost, although it did have a powerful array of sensor systems at its disposal. These systems were there primarily to observe the nearby comings and goings of other vessels, as well as phenomena that might threaten the station. As such, the V-shaped stations next to it were often commandeered by science officers for the extra space, as these contained access to databases and libraries of information. These were also primarily responsible for communications. The command table was at the very centre of ops, featuring the status table ringed by stools. These stools can be slid completely under the table to allow for standing room instead or pulled out to perch. The main display table often showcased the station master system display and layout, with reports and observable data on any point. Around its edges were the inputs to manipulate the displayed image. In other circumstances, the display could be replaced with tactical maps or other such information, and it often doubled as the meeting and briefing point for the senior staff, as besides the commander's office, there was no designated conference room like a Starfleet ship. There are the wardrooms, but they're too far away to be convenient for regular use. This gave it a very public and open forum feel. Its primary function was to provide coordination for the comings and goings of vessels. Along the low walls created by the surrounding consoles was access to an array of isolinear rod systems and 3 displays for communications or other use. Below the command table was a maintenance pit, fenced off for safety with 2 ladders for access into the lowest point in ops. An array of displays and interfaces down here displayed the main computer's operations, processes and coding on the outer edge. The internal edge featured access points to make modifications to the computer core, which suggests that the top of the core was accessible through these points. This is an assumption though, as the only reference I could find was in the fact files that labelled it as the systems core. There was a nearby wireless console that could be repositioned where needed, residing nearby to the pit, often along with toolkits and such. Above the pit and directly opposite the Overseer's office was the main view screen, which was a suspended holographic ring that filled in a 2D image from the external cameras linked to viewing devices, information or more frequently, communications. There was an emergency medical kit and a small hand phaser locker placed in ops, usually tucked away somewhere, and finally, on the uppermost level adjacent to the turbolift was a single replicator station, because grabbing a snack while on duty shouldn't pull you away from your post. Under Starfleet management, the decision was made early on to repair and maintain the Cardassian computers, as replacing them would have been too much trouble. But some Starfleet software and hardware was added, including the more liberal use of voice commands, as many Cardassian systems still preferred manual inputs. So, that covers the consoles and positions of ops. Getting a look around in this fashion really helps flesh out the realism of the centre, and if you're interested, this footage was captured from Star Trek Online, which has done a lovely job recreating it. Thanks for watching, I've been Rick, and I plan to tackle the Promenade next. Until then, goodbye.